Fear is always irrational, even if its causes are quite rational. Fear makes people make mistakes, and if it encompasses a large part of society, the consequences of such mistakes can be catastrophic. The Roman senators were very afraid, so much so that they decided to prevent a terrible fate for the Republic and assassinate the new dictator, Pompey. In order to understand how the Republic came to live such a life, you have to rewind back in time. Fear in general originated quite a long time ago, back in the days of Maria and Sulla, when they very clearly showed what is nothing unlimited dictatorship. Since then, the senators were afraid that one day a new Sulla would appear and drown in the blood of senators to show who is the power. Nevertheless, the fear did not prevent the Senate from creating a new Sulla themselves. At first, of course, everything looked fine. Pompey, one of the best military leaders of Sulla, helps the Senate to stabilize the situation after the death of the dictator, ensuring the loyalty of his veterans. The Senate needed such a loyal dog of the regime badly. Pompey needed the Senate to maintain his status, especially since the Republic was turbulent. In Spain raised its head Marians under the leadership of Sertorius on the sea-raging pirates in the east again worried King Mithridates. Wherever the Romans had difficulties, the Senate sends there Pompey, and he solves them. Where Pompey is, there is victory. Arrived in Spain, where the Romans received from Sertorius and quickly defeated him. He was given the task of cleansing the Mediterranean of pirates. In a couple of years, he wiped out the filth that couldn't be wiped out for decades. Lucullus lost the war to Mithridates, and his own troops refused to fight. He arrived in the east and defeated the rebellious king of Pontus with lightning speed. True, the Senate sent Pompey to the east only to deal with the problem of Mithridates, and Pompey, having finished the war, took and without any authorization from Rome joined the republic of a number of eastern kingdoms, and this was already dangerous. By the end of the campaign in the east, Pompey was the most powerful Roman. The plebs awaited Pompey's return with incredible enthusiasm, fueled by rumors of the vast riches he would bring to Rome. The paranoia of the Senate was further fueled by Catiline, who had organized a conspiracy right under their noses. It was rumored that Catilina wanted to transfer power to Pompey in case of success. The Senate had no alternative to Pompey, and therefore his return was awaited with fear and doom. Pompey arrives in Italy and dissolves the legions, sending a request to the Senate to give him a triumph and consulship. Apparently he thought that under the circumstances the Senate will unconditionally fulfill all requests. But the Senate, having praised the gods, begins to delay the process of organizing the triumph, thus disrupting the election of consul. At the same time, an initiative group of senators led by Cato and Metellus gathers anti-Pompeian coalition, which should arrange Pompey's cruelest demolition in the Senate. At the head of this coalition put unsuccessful Lucullus, who after the failure with Mithridates was thrown out of Roman politics and indulged in alcoholism. Now Lucullus was given a second chance to return to the big leagues. The main vector of attack was to dismantle every decision of Pompey during the war with Mithridates, massive criticism and every possible delay in the approval process. The main goal was to drain Pompey's reputation in the process, both with the plebs, making him look corrupt and tyrannical, and with his veterans, not allowing the approval of the law on their resettlement. Everything was fine. Pompey was clearly losing and was on the verge of complete withdrawal from politics, as suddenly in the election of the consul wins Caesar, which the Senate almost directly said that he was not welcome in the consuls, and almost immediately Caesar begins to act in the interests of Pompey, approving various decrees. This is a clear political coup d'état that benefits Pompey exclusively. Tyranny, which everyone feared so much, came much milder than expected. But no one doubted that Pompey would still have time to nail everyone. Those who recently thought that Pompey is already a political corpse, now in a frenzy trying to figure out how to replay everything. But the legal methods of confrontation run into a suddenly emerged in the Senate support group of Caesar and Pompey, which naturally arose on the money of Crassus. That's when fear is replaced by real horror. The Republic is over. Pompey has outplayed everyone. We are all over too. And this horror pushes part of the Senate opposition to a completely insane step, an attempt to kill the tyrant and save the Republic. At the head of the conspiracy stand two people who suffered most from the coup of Pompey: Lucullus, who was no one needed after the failure of the trial of Pompey, and Bibulus, the second consul, whom Caesar skillfully moved away from the levers of power. One, in despair at another defeat, was ready to trade Pompey's life for the status of savior of the Republic. The second was in despair at the unsuccessfulness of legal methods of fighting the Pompeians. They were joined by many senators dissatisfied with Pompey, but not Cato, who argued that the salvation of the Republic could not be realized through the unlawful killing of a man. In addition to the conspiracy pulled and prosinatskoi youth, led by Gaius Scribonius Curian Jr. and Clodius, the same guy who sneaked to Caesar's wife for a date in the form of a girl. The gist of the plot was simple. Lucullus hires the notorious bugger Lucius Vettius and gives him a knife to stab Pompey to death. After the murder, the conspirators were to neutralize Pompey's supporters, and especially Caesar's. Simply put, to repeat and outline the same thing that would take place in the Ides of March a dozen years later. A simple plan? It is not. As it turned out, there was absolutely no unity among the conspirators. Bibul was the first to fall away from the conspiracy. He'd always been friends with Cato, and he'd been persuaded that murder was not the answer. Therefore, Bibulus decided to step aside and secretly met with Pompey and hinted to him that in the near future something bad may happen to him. Further events are not entirely clear. Whether Vettius, instead of killing, decided to sell Pompey the secret of the conspiracy, or whether the warning Bibulum Pompey leaked to the conspirators. But Curian Jr. ran to his father and told him that the conspiracy seems to have been uncovered. Curian Sr. immediately goes to the Senate, in another version, first to Pompey, and tells the speech that he has succeeded in uncovering the plot to assassinate Pompey, led by Vettius. Vettius is seized right on the street, immediately led to the Senate, where without preamble accused that he wanted to kill Pompey. Shocked by this turn of events, Vettius gives up all the organizers of the conspiracy. This speech had the effect of a bombshell. Consul Caesar, who was present at the meeting, immediately brought Vettius to the forum and forced him to repeat everything he had previously said. In the hands of Caesar was a bomb that could bury a significant part of the Senate opposition. While the trial is being organized, Caesar re-examines Vettius, and that already in a quiet atmosphere makes anew, now supposedly complete, the list of conspirators from which mysteriously disappear almost all the young people, including Curian Jr. and Marcus Junius Brutus, the same. But the list of conspirators includes Cicero and other leaders of the Senate opposition. The next day, Caesar brings Vettius to the forum and forced to repeat before the people his new testimony. Caesar had the entire Senate opposition by the throat, for even if they were able to refute Vettius's claims, their reputations could suffer greatly during the trial. That same night, the carefully guarded Vettius was murdered in his prison cell, and the case fell apart. There are several opinions as to what it was. For a long time dominated the theory, known from the letters of Cicero, that all this was a clever staging Caesar in order to finally quarrel Pompey and the Senate, and there was indeed a benefit in such an action. The Vettius affair burned all remaining bridges between Pompey and the Senate. But the problem with this theory is that it is not clear why there were two different confessions by Vettius. The explanation that it was all a cunning plan is not logical, as it was much more logical to accuse all the opposition leaders at once. In addition, this version is based on the letters of Cicero, who thus could take revenge on Caesar for including him in the list of conspirators. It is more likely that the conspiracy itself really was, and its organizers really scared when they realized that Pompey something xanate. Then they decide to hand over Vettius, but he manages to intercept Caesar and force him to confess right in the Senate without preparation. This action struck a blow to Caesar's enemies, but did not hurt the main leaders of the opposition. Then Caesar persuades Vettius to change his testimony. From the testimony is removed from the youth, in the hope of more loyalty for getting rid of the threat, but appear politicians of the first rank. And, characteristically, the appearance of Cicero in the list of organizers is not accidental. Vettius was his key informant during the case of Catiline, and there were persistent rumors that he was generally on his payroll. Therefore, Cicero would have to sweat a lot to prove that if he did not organize the conspiracy, then at least did not know about it. It is possible that this conspiracy was conducted from behind the scenes by Crassus, allowing it to reach the stage where his betrayal would have caused maximum damage. These suspicions are based on the fact that the actions of Curian the Fearful were the trigger that caused the Senate to act impulsively. Considering that Curian Jr. was Clodius's best friend and co-conspirator in many of Clodius's outrages, Curian Sr. was his defense in the Senate, and Crassus paid for the whole party out of his pocket. The latter's ears are clearly sticking out in this case. In connection with this comes out quite an amusing combination. Crassus, through his protege Clodius, learns that Lucullus is recruiting people for some action. He sends to Lucullus Curian Jr., who rubs himself in the confidence of the conspirators, waits until the conspiracy enters the phase of preparation, surrenders the conspiracy through Curian Sr. Prophet. At this point, Caesar intervenes. He realizes that if the case Vettius will be brought to the end, then with the Senate opposition can say goodbye, and then nothing will stop the triumvirs from the beginning of mutual destruction. And Caesar is no match for Pompey and Crassus. And then he gets Vettius to change the testimony, to lastly spoil his opponents, and then Vettius tactfully removed. As a result, the Senate opposition is destroyed with Pompey. He is again forced to continue to cooperate with Crassus and Caesar. Caesar, on the one hand, gained a reputation among the youth, on the other, spoiled the reputation of his detractors. Crassus has achieved that Pompey and the Senate are now at each other's throats and will not interfere, and the organizers of the conspiracy will remain in fools, but at least with their lives, as the punishment for such an act in Rome could be very severe.